Right. Good stuff. So we're in here. We're doing it. Oh, getting everything up. Making sure we actually have audio now. Right. Quiet stream. Okay. Pull this up. Good stuff. Looks like all that's working. I mean, I think we're in there. I think we're doing it. Okay. So I think at this point then we'll go ahead and yeah, just start everything. There's any other technical bits, so cool. All right, how to start dungeon mastering, what we're talking about today. Well, if I can, okay, cool. So yeah, so how to start dungeon mastering. Now, of course, the one thing that nobody wants to hear when they're asking advice is it depends. Unfortunately, that is usually one of the best things that you can say with things like this, right? Because it depends on your experience with the game with this kind of thing, right? Almost just like with anything, where do you start kind of depends on where you're at. So with something like D&D, something like dungeon mastering especially, it encompasses so much, right, that your experience with the game itself, just with the game of D&D, can, you know, greatly shift where you should be starting at. Now, what I like to recommend for people is if you have never played before, then the first thing you should do is watch a game, right? So how to start depends, right, on experience. So if you've never played, watch a game. And the reason why I say that is because it's so easy to watch a game, right? It's a lot easier than trying to find a group, maybe convince your friends to play, maybe even to let them, you know, get you in a campaign or something, right? It's very different, very different. As a person who has played in many games and also talked to many people that have played and stuff like that, I've watched a lot of games as well, you know, and I've helped a lot of dungeon masters. I've seen that, you know, one of the best ways to get experience, to learn, is to just have an ease of access. So watching a game, there's, you know, a million games online that you can go and watch, you know, good high quality games that you're going to learn a lot of stuff from, regardless of your experience level. But if you've never played before, it can be very easy to watch a game, and there's no, there's no stress about it. There's no nerves. Am I making the right choices? Nothing like that, right? So if you've just heard some friends talking about it, then the best thing you can do is just go and watch a game. Now if you've played or if you've watched the game already, right, you've seen some of it, but you've never played, then rather than jumping straight into dungeon mastering, I would suggest that you play the game. Play a game as a player if you can, right? Now, the reason why I say this is because there are going to be things that you won't understand the same way, right? When you're playing as a dungeon master, you have a lot more control, a lot more power, a lot more responsibility as well, and you won't understand what it's really like to be a player until you've, set in that seat where you've had a choice before you, it's left or right, yes or no, oh, I only have one option here, but I'm going to roll the dice and whatever it says, that's what kind of goes, right? You have a way less authority over the game. And so it can be very helpful for you, very good to understand just what you're trying to do for the players because you've been there before. So playing the game as a player is very good. Now that's from a philosophical standpoint, a perspective and all that kind of stuff, and that's all nice, but also on a very real just mechanical level, it can be overwhelmingly helpful to play, because once you've played, you start understanding a little bit of how the game goes. You understand combat way more, right, than if you've never played, right? You understand a lot more things. When you're watching stuff too, it's easy to zone out, easy to not pay attention, but when you are in the game, right? And it comes up around to your turn, you know, your brain is engaged in this tactical kind of way very differently, right? You understand, okay, my character is here and they're going to do this. Okay, what's the best option that again, you understand what it's like to play in the game, and you get a sense of limiting your options. So it's kind of like, easing yourself into the water, just playing a game as a player. Now, after you've played, I would say, and I'll go ahead and put this down here. So after you've played a game or a couple, right? And it can be good to play with multiple dungeon masters, right? There's going to be some interesting things that you can do. But after you've played a game, I would say it is then time to watch a game, but pay attention. If I could spell. Pay attention to the DM, right? Now, the reason why you want to watch a game, but pay attention to the DM is because you're going to want to take notes on the Dungeon Master's style, basically. There's going to be things that were fun for you, things that were cool to you, things that you didn't like. And taking notes on what that is going to be so beneficial for you, right? Just paying attention to those things, paying attention to what the Dungeon Master does and what they don't. Specifically, the silence is something that I think not a lot of people think about when they're first getting into DMing. They don't realize, when should you not do something? When should you just sit back, let the players talk, let the players figure out what's going on, right? There is a tendency for some dungeon masters to some brand new ones that look at the game and that have even played the game, but they haven't studied what that role really is at all. So they look at it and say, okay, well, I'm just going to run a game, and that's fine. Just trying to do your best. That's fine. But when they see that there's a lot of control that happens, a lot of responsibility, then they try to control everything, right? And it's like, you don't need to, right? You can let the players decide where they're going to go. You can let the players decide what's the next fun thing to do. It's not everything is on you. So, and sometimes even when something bad is happening, the best thing you can do is just, sit back and be silent. So I would say that to watch a game, but pay attention to the DM and to take notes on the DM's style, right? It's going to be very important for you to take notes on that style. When you do that, you're going to see that when you're removed from a game, you're not watching it for entertainment. You're not playing in it. So you have to make these tactical choices, mechanics, and keep these things in mind. When you just are removed from it, you can say, I would have done that differently. Or I just feel like he missed an opportunity to do this. Why did he do that, right? When you're really sitting here and seeing these things and thinking about it in this way, it can help you so much. It's going to help you become comfortable with certain situations, right? You're going to see certain things before they attack you unexpectedly, right? So there's a situation that happens to every dungeon master and if you played a game, if you watched the game, you've seen it already, right? Where someone's in town or someone is, a player, right? A player character is in town, they're doing something, and they come across an NPC that it's very clear and obvious that NPC has been brought in at a low resolution, right? A low resolution. They don't have maybe not a name. You don't know the hair color, nothing. You just say, oh, there's a woman on the street. That's all that maybe the DM has said. So that's a low resolution object been brought in. Now, what's interesting about that is that this situation that comes up is a player will then say, I walk up to the woman. What color is her hair? What is she wearing? Oh, okay. Well, then I tap her on her shoulder. Excuse me, miss. What's your name? My name is blah, 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 right? I introduce myself to her. Whatever, right? You're going to see this situation come up where a player will bring into focus an object that's been brought in at low resolution. They make the DM resolve it at a higher resolution. Now, when you're a new dungeon master, that can be very scary. It can be, a little bit overwhelming because you're like, oh, I don't have anything prepared. That was just a person. I just said that offhanded. Or I just said, yeah, there's people on the street when they asked. Is there a woman that I see? Or is the man that yeah, sure, yeah, whatever. And then next thing you know, you're having to describe these things you might not know. You might even notice that you just rely on things that are sort of like a trend or like a template, right? Where everybody has, the same color hair. Everybody has the same color eyes. Everybody has the same voice. All these things, right? So being comfortable, right? Being comfortable in certain situations like that, that's just one, but certain situations like that is going to be probably the most powerful thing to help you start Dungeon Master, is being comfortable in it. Now, how do you get comfortable in that? It's just either experience with it, either firsthand, because it's happened to you, or preparation. So I tend to like the preparation side of it, right? Because you can, even if you're comfortable, not being prepared, it can still be a hassle for you to come up with something, right? You just need less preparation to, I think, be comfortable, basically. Now, what's interesting though is that you can get some preparation and some comfort with it, some experience basically, by watching other Dungeon Masters go through it. So that's why I say it's so important to, take notes on the Dungeon Master's style, to watch a game that you're removed from and to pay attention to what the DM does. Any moment that you like, it might be a moment where you say, oh wow, I really liked this, crazy voice, this crazy character that Dungeon Master came up with. I really liked how bland this one person was. But what's interesting? Okay, yeah, all the other NPCs aren't bland, but this person is, and because this person is bland, they stand out. Contrast, right? You're gonna see all these types of things. So cool. Taking notes on the DM style. Now, at that point, right, I'd say, okay, am I ready to start finally dungeon mastering, right? You can dungeon master at any time. And maybe you already have, right? Maybe you're seeing this stuff and you're like, okay, but I just want to know how to get better, right? Whatever. At that point, beyond the mechanics, right? Because there's going to be mechanics. There's comfort, right, in the mechanics. There's comfort in that experience of just knowing how something works, right? The basic rules, even though you are going to be role where you get the last say on things, it can be nice to just know, okay, what's the accepted rules for grappling? What's the accepted rules for spell casting, right? Well, do you need that component or not? I don't remember. Being comfortable with the rules and the mechanics, of course, can help you. But many people will say, they'll tell you that's not the most important. It really isn't, right? At the end of the day, if everyone had fun, if everyone had a good time, or even just the majority had a good time, hey, then you did what you could, right? So I would say that the next thing to worry about is how to improve at this point, right? Because you're going to probably run a session or 2 or 5, and you're going to say, okay, that wasn't so scary, right? You just start, you just do it, right? You've seen how it goes. If you've played a couple of games, it's better than any advice that anybody could give you, right? It's just playing a few games. But after that, when you say, okay, I'm going to start now, or I've even kind of ran like a one shot or whatever, but I want to get better. I want to, achieve something, more, right? At that point, it turns now to how to improve. And the way you're going to do that is by working on your foundation. And that might sound a little crazy, right? What do you mean working on your foundation? Now that can mean stuff like, mechanics, right? Or rules. But it can also mean stuff like understanding things like story, just story, not necessarily storytelling, but just what is a story, right? What is this thing, right? What is what do you really use the dice for? All these sorts of things, right? Just foundational skills. I would say that the best things that you could focus on at this point are the questions of what is Dungeon Master, and what is D&D at its core? And I would say that those two things, those are going to be, very helpful for you to dive deep into, right? From a philosophical standpoint and stuff like that, right? Which I know you're like, hey man, this is a game. Why are we diving in like this? But it can be extremely helpful, to really answer some questions for yourself. And I have found that they give you tools, those answers. They give you tools on how to approach different things going forward. When you're stumped, when you're faced with a problem, when a player is being a problem player, maybe, all these sorts of things, right? You're like, okay, what's the best thing to do here? How do I get myself out of this situation? How do I, bring this all to a satisfying conclusion? Oh, let me understand some of these basics here. What are we really doing at the core of all this? What is my role in this, right? What are they supposed to be doing? What am I supposed to be doing? Cool. Now, I have seen many people try to define D&D. I've seen many people try to define what a dungeon master is or what that role should be. So I will just give you what I believe is most helpful for a dungeon master. Now, this might not be the most accurate and technical definition or something like that, but I have heard people say that a dungeon master is a guide, right? It's a guide because D&D is some like cooperative storytelling experience. So you're a guide helping them tell the story. I've also seen just straight up, oh, well, a dungeon master is just a storyteller, right? That's what some people say. Some people say, well, a dungeon master is not a guide or a storyteller. They're more like a referee, right? It's like a sport or like a game, and they're just like keeping the rules, right? I personally don't think it's that you're a guide or a storyteller or a referee. I think that it's none of those things and all of them together, which might seem like a cop-out answer, and maybe it is, but I think that honestly that the role, the title of like a dungeon master, a game master, or whatever, right? The role that takes on in a game of D&D or some other, tabletop role-playing game is truly unique enough to not have an easy synonym to just kind of slot in on that. Like truly, when you hear about someone being, a dungeon master, when you see a dungeon master do something, there are going to be moments where you go, well, there's nothing to do with the rules right there, right? They're role-playing like, a scared villager. That has nothing to do with rules, really, truly, it doesn't. There's no rule for that. They're not keeping rules, they're not being a referee. And there's going to be other moments where you're just crunching numbers, keeping mechanics, and you are being just a referee. So in some moments you're a storyteller, some moments you're a referee, some moments you're just a guide, right? You're just there helping people get through a situation where you say, oh, these two, players are talking about something. They're trying to figure out what they're supposed to be doing or whatever, right? And you're just helping them. That's all you're doing. There's no rules to be had, and you're not telling a story either. You're just guiding them. So again, I think all those definitions can work, I guess, but only in certain moments. In other moments, those definitions fail horribly, which means that none of them are big enough, basically. You need something else above that, and that's why I think we have something like Dungeon Master. Now, of course, are you just mastering dungeons? No, that's not what you're doing, right? You can run whole campaigns and never see a dungeon, right? I actually find a lot of dungeon masters don't run dungeons very, very much, right? Especially when they're new. They're like, I don't know, I guess there's like a camp of enemies, or there's a building, and it's like, I guess a building can be a dungeon, right? A one-room building, sure. So there's all sorts of things right here, but I think that really, like I said, diving into this, understanding that what your role really is as a dungeon master is going to be that sometimes you're a guide, sometimes you're a storyteller, and sometimes you're a referee, and that at all times, you really need to remember that you're all of those things together, which can, be a lot. So now, what's D&D at its core? This right here, this question, that's a tough one, right? But it's not tough for for me to answer. It took a long time for me to kind of go through everything for myself, right? To really understand what is it that we're all gathering up to do. Are we here to just, again, like, is it a cooperative storytelling experience? I've heard that so many times, and it's just something about that just seems so wrong to me. Sometimes, I might have a player and all they want to do is just, they just want to, click clack, get them math rocks together, shake them, throw them on the table, and then they get excited that they're getting to, kill something, or they're getting, they're laughing when they failed at something. Right? Either way, they're having a good time, and it's just about the math rocks. I've seen that before, and I'm like, I love story, and it doesn't feel like just a pure story to me. So I think that before we get into what is D&D at its core, I think we will answer one more thing here about DMs. We will say, or ask this question here, that what does a dungeon master do? Right? I'm going to put these two things here, and we will go over those in a little bit. But what a dungeon master does is they create and they simulate. Now, that might seem like, really wild, really weird, really out there, a little bit too abstract, and maybe it is, but I think that it's helpful to remember that it's just two things that you're doing at all times. You're just creating and simulating. That's all you're doing. Now, there's a lot of depth, there's a lot of skill, there's a high skill ceiling to that, but yeah, that's all you're ever doing. Now I think we can go in here and say, what is Dungeons and Dragons at its core? Of course, you can substitute this out. What is a tabletop role-playing game at its core, right? But for our purposes, we're just going to stick with D&D here. I know it the best, but what is D&D at its core? Well, it is a game. That's what it is at its core. It's a game. You might say, well, of course, but I have found almost always, that especially new DMs, they forget a lot of times when they have trouble, what they're doing is they're forgetting that it's a game. They're trying to make it something that it's not. They're trying to make it a story, like a novel, or they're trying to make it just pure like a math simulation or something. And it's like, no, it is a game. But if you don't know what a game really is, and I don't mean that you've never played a game, I mean that you wouldn't be able to define it. Right? Again, we're trying to go deep so that you have tools, right? The understanding that you get from this will be tools to help you, anytime you're trying to do anything, right? Anytime you're trying to create or simulate. So if you don't know what a game is, it's not that definition that isn't really going to help you to remember that it's a game, right? A game is a social contract that involves skill and chance. And you might hear that definition and say, nope, I don't like this guy. Forget that. It's not a social contract. No. I don't buy none of this, right? What about solitaire, huh? Is that a social contract? But, me out on this one. A game really is a social contract that involves skill and chance. I'll use something like solitaire for those of maybe you've never heard of solitaire, but it's a single player card game. You play a card game by yourself. You might say, how is that a social contract? Social sounds like between multiple people. The reason why it's a social contract that involves skill and chance is because you didn't make the rules. Someone else did. And if you say you're playing solitaire, then you are saying that you will stay within the bounds of that contract. In other words, a rule set. If someone told you that they played solitaire, but they played with the cards all facing up, that they just chose what they wanted and all the cards were facing up all the time, right? You would say, well, wait a minute, that's not solitaire, right? You didn't play solitaire. I don't know what you played, but that's not solitaire. So it doesn't matter how good you did at the game because you didn't follow the rules, and the rules were set by someone else. Or at the very least, even if you created your own game and then played it, when you talk to other people about it, right? When other people become aware of what this thing is that you've created, right? Everyone has to agree that you stayed within the bounds, within that contract in order to recognize what you've truly done. Cool. Now, a social contract, break those two terms down here, right? Social contract. Social. Meaning multiple people. Pretty easy, right? It's not social to be by yourself. Contract. This means a binding agreement. And that's very important when it comes to remembering that D&D game, that a game is a social contract that involves skill and chance, and trying to figure out, okay, as a dungeon master, what do I really need to be worried about? I need to worry about the fact that this is a binding agreement between multiple people. In other words, people are not showing up for one thing and then you give them another and they're going to be happy. That's not what's going on here. They're showing up for something. They're showing up to play a game of D&D, to play a session of D. So all you are responsible for as a dungeon master is providing whatever everyone has agreed on that you would provide. That's it. Now, some people might say, I am waiting on you as a player, right? They might say, I'm waiting on you to entertain me. And if you don't want to do that, well then you no longer have the social contract part here, right? Everyone's not playing the same game. Problems will ensue, for sure, right? So make sure you're on the same page, or, like 100%. Before you start playing, make sure you're on the same page here. because that's where that binding agreement comes in. Some people show up and they're just like, hey, I'm not going to think about anything. I just want to sit back. It's almost like I want to watch a live play. And as a DM, you might say, I don't want to put on a one-person play or whatever. I want us to play a game. And so again, two different people are sitting down and they've both agreed to two different things. Everyone needs to be on the same page with this. This is why so many people will, if you look at Dungeon Master advice or whatever, they'll say stuff like, make sure that everyone understands that they're playing the same game. Make sure that everyone, knows what they're in for. Some people talk about safety terms ahead of time and stuff like that. I've never been big on those sorts of things, but I do believe that that everyone should be on the same page of what we're doing, right? If I'm going to run a scary game and you want to play in a scary game, everything's all good. Or if you say as a player, oh, you know what? I don't even care what we do. I just want to play a game of D&D. So, hey man, whatever's happening, and I do something and you're fine with it, then sure, everyone's on the same page. But if I say I want to do something very specific and you say you want to do something different that's specific, well, then there we have a problem. So make sure everybody's on the same page, because again, D&D, it's not going to be this game here without multiple people all agreeing on something. Some people will say, no, well, a DM can, I guess run their own PC or something through, I don't know, through a game by themselves, right? Like a one-player D&D. I've never seen that be a successful thing. I've heard about it. I've heard about people doing that, but for our purposes here, that's definitely not how we're going to look at D&D and Dungeon Master. So this is, a binding agreement between multiple people. All right. Now, we got that down, right? But what about this other stuff here, right? What about this skill and chance? I just realized, oh my goodness, I can. That. Make it bold. Perfect. That's exactly right. Bold it all out, Cool. So, how about this other stuff here? How about skill? Bold that as well. Just bold everything. Skill and chance. Now, most people will say that they understand somewhat, like, oh, what skill is or what chance is. But there's a reason that I'm telling you that one of the best things that you can do is remember that D&D is a game, and a game is a social contract that involves skill and chance, because every single moment of the game, the only thing that you need to be doing is presenting a situation that involves skill and chance. That's it. That's all you're doing, right? Now, sometimes, of course, yes, it would be just a skill, right? What do you do? Sometimes it's just chance. Hey, just roll the dice. That's all you got to do. But that's the majority of everything that you're doing here as a DM is just going to be providing a situation where players can demonstrate skill and battle with chance, right? Now, what really is skill? Well, it is, because it helps to understand it, right? The ability to make correct choices that lead to a specific outcome. Now, the ability to make correct choices that lead to a specific outcome. The reason that I am defining skill in that way is because it is not just making the choices, right? It truly is the ability to, right? Especially in a game of Dungeons and Dragons. But we can even, still extrapolate this out to the real world too. So if I am not strong enough, right, to lift something, or let's say to kick down a door. If I'm not strong enough to kick down a door, right, I don't have the ability to make the correct choice that might be kicking down the door, right? So if what needs to be done is the door needs to be kicked down, and I can't kick down the door because I'm not strong enough, even if I make the right choice that I should do it, and even if I make the right choice of where to put my foot, right? Now, I'm pretty sure I can actually kick down a door, but let's say that I was, extremely weak or something. I couldn't do it, right? Now, even if I might know the weak point, I might be really smart, have a 19 in intelligence, right? And know, oh, you know what? If I kick right next to that doorknob, that's the best place. It doesn't matter because I actually don't have the ability to make that correct choice to lead to the specific outcome of the door being kicked open and blah, blah. Now, so at least for our purposes here for the game, but again, I think you can still apply that to real life. Skill is talking about the ability to make the correct choice. Now, chance. Chance is pretty easy, right? Chance is just, chaos and unpredictability. Now, the reason that this is so important, right? These two things. I actually believe that if you didn't, even if you didn't agree or you didn't understand or whatever about like social contract stuff or whatever, understanding the skill and chance part, it's like with those two things, you can DM your first session, your second, your fifth, your 10th, and still have great and fun times. Set up a situation where there's unpredictability, right? There's chaos involved. In other words, and for us, we're going to use dice, math rocks, right? We say, hey, I don't know what's going to happen. You don't know what's going to happen. And you need to make the correct choice. Those two things alone will be more than enough to get you so many fun times, so much just fun and cool, funny and cool moments, right? Watching someone roll an at 20, watching someone roll an at 1 is fun, right? Sometimes it's just, okay, you try to hop up on the table. Okay, yeah, sure, right? Someone makes a choice, right? They say, hey, I'm gonna hop up on the table to try to get everyone's attention in the tavern. Something very, very simple. They're trying to get attention and they think that the right choice, right, is hopping up on the table. Surely they have the ability to hop up on the choice, right? But maybe as a dungeon master, you remember that, hey, that the cool moments, the things that I'm supposed to be doing are supposed to involve skill and chance. So let me make them roll, right? It doesn't mean you should roll all the time, for sure. That's a terrible thing to do, is roll all the time. But especially if there hasn't been any chaos, if there hasn't been any unpredictability in a while, you might then say, you know what? Go ahead and give me a roll. We'll see how well you do this. In other words, how cool do you look, right? How smooth is it? How easy is it for you, right? How much do you impress people? There's all sorts of rewards that you can give someone for overcoming chaos and unpredictability. So when that person makes a jump onto the table, they've made the choice, and then they roll the dice, right? They combat chaos and unpredictability. They tell you, oh, I got a 15. Now what you get to do is you reward them with something. You jump up on the table, and just the act of it, it looks so smooth, it looks so nice, but in the way that you come up from your stance on hopping up on the table, everyone's eyes are drawn to you, right? You reward them with what they were wanting, right? Hey, you wanted attention. You successfully overcame chaos and unpredictability. Here's the reward that you were looking for, or at least something close to it. Now, of course, if they roll a nat 1, oh my goodness, right? You try to jump up, but you've had too much to drink or something like that. Your feet clip the table. Boom, you go, ass over, what is it, tea kettle, whatever it is. And you just mess up, right? Now, chaos and unpredictability are the fun part of the game often, right? This is why someone can be a min-maxer, right? They're trying to minimize failure, maximize success, but they can still have fun at the game. Because what they want to know is, hey, the skill, right? The choices I made at character creation, the choices I made when I was leveling up, right? The choices I make in the game where I always try to do whatever seems to be the easiest thing to do or whatever. They want to know, is my skill high enough to overcome all of the chaos and unpredictability? That's really what it is. If you never make a person roll for things that they want, if it's all skill based, basically, right? Hey, make the choice. Do you do this? Do you do this? Hey, I hop up on the table. Okay, you hop up on the table. I say these things. Okay, you know what? It works. Okay, cool. If it's all skill based, then what happens is other players, right, that aren't able to make correct choices, they feel, for one, that they're not really playing a game. And even the person that makes the correct choices, they will feel like they're not playing a game anymore. Now, don't get me wrong, they might be having fun. They might even like what they're doing at first, but they showed up to play a game, and once it shifts to, oh, they're actually, just sitting here telling you a story, and you're just saying, yeah, sure, that's what happens. Okay, cool. You're responding to them and helping them tell the story. They will stop playing a game, and everyone won't be having a good time because, again, there's a binding agreement going on that we showed up to play a game, right? Where are the dice? Why did I buy dice? Why did I choose these things to give me a +3 on my dice rolls if you're not making me have any dice rolls? So what chance can also help you do, and chaos and unpredictability here, is it avoids a slog. Right? No one likes a slog. In fact, I should capitalize this. You know what? I should even bold it, because no one likes a slog, right? Now, for those that don't know, a slog is basically when something has no unpredictability anymore. There's no chaos in it anymore, and you're just going through the motion, right? You're still making correct choices, but it's not fun anymore because there's no unpredictability. So a fight, right? A fight that's going on for a little too long, a fight or a situation or a scene or whatever it is. You know, some players hate when everyone else is like shopping at the at the market or whatever, right? Sometimes every player can just get bored of being in a fight for a long time. That happens because it has turned into a slog. Everyone knows, okay, there's no unpredictability. Some people would say there's no stakes, right? And that's 100% can be a thing. But I feel like that a fight can be a slog even when there are stakes, right? Hey, your characters might die from this, but it's happening in a very slow fashion, right? It's happening, it's like, oh, another turn has gone by, another turn has gone by. And you know what? Maybe we're losing, maybe we're winning, but either way, we're doing it very slowly. That's still a problem. The stakes are the same. Hey, if we lose this, we die. And they might still, kill us or something like that. If they crit, that's it. Maybe, maybe someone has some special ability or whatever. But the thing is that without unpredictability on each turn, or at least, every round or whatever it is, it's going to slip closer and closer to a slog. I've usually seen that once, about 5 turns in, something like that, most combats, if they aren't trending one way or the other and they're not coming to a close soon, players start to slip into that, slog state, right? So usually, this is why boss battles feel intuitively correct to have, right? Or these big, huge hordes coming at the players, maybe some kind of, magical mechanics going on or whatever. Because if it's just, okay, there's an equal number of combatants on both sides of the field, you have equal power, we're just seeing if the rolls are going to go, towards your side or towards the other, right? It doesn't feel as fun anymore, because even though it's unpredictable by what we're going to roll, right? It's also going to even out if we're all equally powered, right? So maybe a big boss, it's like, well, man, we don't know what he's going to roll. And that means something because he's stronger than each of us individually, right? So that unpredictability has meaning. So cool. So we've talked about skill. We've talked about chance. Now, again, D&D at its core, it's a game, and a game is a social contract that involves skill and chance. That is very important to remember. Okay, it's very important to remember. That's really all you really need to know about, the game of Dungeons and Dragons. Now, when we're talking about these other things here that we mentioned, right? We mentioned, what does the Dungeon Master do? They create and they simulate. Now, where does this fit into the game, right? Well, that really fits in where you believe your role as a DM fits in, right? So, role of the Dungeon Master. Ooh, you know what? Is there a... No, there's not an underline. Okay. Try to see if there's an underline on this program. Now, I've used it for months too. Don't even know. I don't know. There's a way to do it. Anyways, so role of the Dungeon Master. Right, especially understanding that this is a game, understanding that you want to set up situations where there's skill and there's chance. The reason why we're going to talk about this here is because, again, all you're doing is you're making sure that there's creation going on and simulation going on. You are the person that has authority over creation and simulation. Specifically, with creation, the DM has authority to bring into the world objects at different resolutions. Now I'll break that down a little bit here, because what that means is that this idea, oops, I definitely realized I just misspelled that. So what that means though is that the Dungeon Master has the ability to, the authority to bring into the world, right, anything, right, a building, an enemy, an NPC, whatever it is, right, a meteor, fireball, whatever. They have the ability to bring these things into the world by saying that it exists. But the reason why I say at different resolutions is because just because you say that there is a stone building Doesn't mean you've described what this stone building looks like. It doesn't mean you've described anything about it, right? Other than it's a stone building. Now, all you have to do is say that. It's brought in at a low resolution, right? And then you and all of the players understand that there is a stone building somewhere, right? You might say across the street, you see a stone building. Now, everyone can imagine a street and a stone building. It's a low resolution, and you have the ability and the authority to bring that into the world. The players can't do that. The dungeon master can do that. So that's where you're doing this creation bit here. Now the players, right, they have, and this is the thing that gets people, right? This is the thing that gets all dungeon masters, right? Is that they only have authority over their character creation when it comes to the creation part, but for simulation, the player has authority to bring the objects, right, into higher resolution. Now, what does that mean for you, right? In order to bring it into, when they bring something into higher resolution, they ask, okay, what does that stone building look like? What does the roof look like? What does the ground look like over here, right? So in other words, there are things that were at a fuzzy kind of low resolution before, and the player has annoyingly, right? And I should actually put this under simulation here. There we go. The player has kind of annoyingly asked you a question. How dare they? Now, when they do that, that is the part that will oftentimes rattle, mess up, shake, leave you shooketh, right? As a new DM, it will say, it'll make you question a lot of things. You might not know. You might feel like, I'm not an architect. I can't describe to you every facet of a building, right? And I might even understand modern buildings better than the average person, but I might not understand medieval buildings or fantasy buildings or sci-fi buildings, whatever your setting is calling for, right? That's the problem. And this is just with a building. It might ask you, okay, what meals are people eating in this tavern? You're like, I don't know, right? They're just, people are eating. And you saying that, you've created all of these things. You've created, plates and silverware and all of these things, tankards and tables and random, people. But again, they're all at low resolution. And they're like background characters in a movie. They're all talking, but you don't know what they're saying in the movie because you don't need to know. It's at a very low resolution. So again, that's what the authority the DM has. And as the players try to bring things into higher resolution, it will oftentimes rattle new players. So what I tell people to do for this, right, is to remember a few things here, right? That you as a DM, you have the responsibility. Whoop. Yeah, if I could spell here. Wow, I definitely messed all that up, huh? Whatever. You have the responsibility of simulating every object and action, which is a lot, but you need to remember that you can control time. It's a very important thing here. And when I say that you remember that you can control time, of course, yes, you can control it in the game. Of course. It seems, whatever. But I also mean you can control it at the table, right? So the players, when they are left to their own devices, right? What do they have the power over, right? Again, in creation, they only have this right here, the power over their character creation. That's it. So if they're not in character creation, they don't have this power of creation anymore, which means that the only thing that they can do is bring things into higher resolution. They can say, we're going to go left or we're going to go right. Now you have to fill out left or right at a higher resolution. Tell them what it smells like, what it looks like, what it feels like. Whereas the other side, if they didn't go right, you don't tell them those things. That's all that they can do. So I have seen before that a new dungeon master will not understanding that point here will allow the players lots of downtime or lots of time to just do whatever they want. Remember that you control time. Now you can let the players just 100% decide at every moment where they're going, but you can also say, again, like a movie or a TV show, or maybe your favorite comic book or whatever it is, you can jump ahead to other things. Okay, you guys spend the next few hours in the tavern, eating, drinking, and having fun, and then you all go to sleep. The next day, boom, and you just jump to the next day, right? This way, they're not going to be pulling things into focus that you're not prepared for. things that you don't want to spend time on because you might even be prepared for it, right? But that's what you really need to understand here, again, is that the role of the Dungeon Master is just creation and simulation. But in order to help you with these things, remember that you can control time. That's all. Now, because you do have the responsibility of simulating every object and every action, that's a lot of things. It makes you nervous. It makes you, get kind of sweaty. Your nerves will be up because everyone is all agreeing here. When we talked about a social contract here, right? This binding agreement is basically that we're going to play this game, right? Which is going to involve skill and chance. You're going to give me an opportunity to roll dice. There's going to be chaotic and unpredictable situations. You're going to give me the ability to make correct choices instead of just saying, what happens to me, right? We agree on all those things, but we also agree on something else, which is somewhat unique, I think, to D&D, which is that, actually, I should make that a note here, huh? We all agree that whatever the DM and dice agree on, that's what happens. So that's a very, very, very extremely important line for you here, that we all agree that everyone, the players, the DM, that everyone agrees that whatever the DM and the dice agree on, that's what happens. As the Dungeon Master, you are essentially this ideal of creation and simulation and essentially order, right? How are things supposed to work? The DM knows, right? You know the rules for grappling. You know the rules for, combat, spell casting, whatever it is, right? You might not know them perfectly, but you know them well enough, right? If someone says they jump out of a window, you simulate in that moment, right, that they're going to fall. Say, okay, as you jump out the window, blah, 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 blah. You feel the wind rushing past you, right? You're simulating all the things that should happen. Maybe that they were in a place, maybe they got teleported somewhere, and they haven't even seen outside the window. And you didn't think about it ahead of time. But when they jump out the window, you create what they see outside. Oh, you see, as you're in the air, you see, a street full of people just waking up, getting to their daily activities, right? And again, in this moment, you brought in things at all these objects here at a low resolution, right? At a very low resolution, just saying there's a street and people. Now, you've created something immediately. And as the player, they've had authority to jump out the window, they're going to bring that street into a higher resolution now, all of a sudden, right? So, the DM and the dice, everyone's agreeing that when you say that there's a street outside, right? Because again, you have that authority. But when the player says they jump out the window and they say, okay, what's going to happen? And you start simulating what happens. You're rushing, they're falling down towards the ground, and they say something like, again, they're going to bring it into higher resolution here. They're going to say, okay, how high of a drop was it? You might say, it was only, 1 story up. They say, okay, maybe they're a monk or something like that, right? Can I roll out of it? Can I do something to break my fall? Something like that, right? At that moment, as the DM, if you believe that it's accurate for the simulation or it's fun for the game, right? Because you believe that, hey, this is a nice part to say, hey, you're going to try to make the correct choice here to break your fall or do parkour or whatever it is, right? And you're going to try to overcome chaos and unpredictability here. And this might be your moment to incorporate skill and chance, right? If you allow them to make this choice, right? Again, it's the ability to make the choice here, skill. So if you allow them to make that choice to do something, and then you say, okay, sure, give me a dice roll, give me an athletics check, give me a, dexterity saving throw, whatever the thing is that you believe that they should roll. Then we bring in chaos and unpredictability. And once that happens, if the dice agree with you, the dice says they rolled a 15, they get a +5 or whatever, right? They go, oh, wow, a 20? I mean, that feels good, right? And at that moment, the DM agrees that, hey, as long as the dice say it's cool, you succeed at this, or you have made the correct choice that led to a specific outcome. So again, that's why this part here is so important, that we all agree that whatever the DM and the dice agree on, that's what happens. Right? Remembering that, right, can be so helpful for you, because since everyone's agreeing on that, if you never let players roll the dice, In other words, you're not giving them a chance, right? Which is another meaning here. When I'm saying chance, I mean, again, chaos and unpredictability. But if you're not incorporating chance or giving them a chance to do something, you don't never let them roll dice, they will not have fun. Everyone has agreed, right? Agreed to show up to play a game. Remember that you're playing a game. All right. At that point, I think we go over, recap stuff a little bit here, right? How to start. If you've never played before, right, watch a game. There's plenty of games online, some really good ones. I just started watching Starstruck Odyssey from the Dimension 20 crew. It's amazing, right? Sci-fi setting, lots of games. So watch a game if you've never played before. If you've played the game or if you don't want to watch it, or you've already watched some stuff, play a game as a player if you can, right? Possibly with multiple DMs. That would be a good thing for you to be able to do, is to play with multiple DMs, because you get to see contrasting styles, certain things that you're going to like, certain things you're going to dislike. It's going to be great. After you've played a game, watch a game this time, but pay attention to the DM, right? This is important because you want to remove yourself. You want to be away from a game where you can say, I'm looking at how the DM does that and I don't like it, but there's no connection to you, right? You don't have any personal stakes in success or failure. You're just trying to see what they're doing, and you dislike or enjoy something that they've done. So you're going to take notes on the style of the DMs that you watch. After that, you're just going to work on improving, right? Whether it's your first time, or you're doing some tests on your own or whatever, right? You're just going to work on improving, which is of course, going to be learning some mechanics and rules, right? It's just something that's helpful, right? It just gives a base foundation that everybody can agree on. This is how this thing works. So if you know it smoothly, you don't have to look it up. Everything's going to flow a little bit better, because again, you're just trying to, you really want to try to avoid a slog here, right? So you want to know some of your stuff here so you can just kind of run things smooth. Now, what is a dungeon master? You're really wearing all these hats all the time, and you're switching them out when you need them, right? Sometimes you're a guide and just letting the players decide what they're going to do, and you're trying to help them make choices. Sometimes you're a storyteller. You're just telling a story and they're just listening. And sometimes you're just a referee. There's no storytelling going on. There's no acting. You're just making sure that the rules are, at least consistent. Cool. All the dungeon master does is create and simulate. Remember that D&D at its core is just a game, and that any game, it's chess or checkers or cards or video games or whatever it is, D&D is just a social contract. Really just means that there's, some sort of agreement. Now, in some games, it's going to be just the rules, right? You boot up a video game and the rules say you can't fly in the game, right? So that's the agreement. You're playing this game if you're following those rules. If you start modding the game or hacking or cheating, all of a sudden it's not the same game. Your achievements don't mean the same thing to other people, because they say, well, you're playing a modded version, you're playing a hacked version, right? It's different. So when you're within the bounds of the agreement, right, then and multiple people are involved, right? That's what we're talking about with a game, right? You didn't make the game, or if you did make the game, then you say that this thing exists, blah blah blah. We went over that, but so I'm not going to go all over it again. But so social contract, all skill and chance. You need to let your players have the ability to make correct choices, right? So you're setting up situations that involve chaos and unpredictability, and then they need to try to make correct choices within those things. Cool. Need both of those. Role of the dungeon master here. Just creating, you're simulating. You have authority to bring into the world objects at different resolutions. Remember that, right? There's gonna be low resolutions, high resolution. You'll learn. We'll talk more about that another time. About how you'll describe something with more detail, and then all of a sudden, all the players will think, that's an important thing. So even when it's not. So and then simulation. Hey. Players have the authority to bring objects into higher resolution. They're going to ask you certain things. What does this person look like? What do they sound like? Blah, blah, blah. Cool. Now, everyone that plays the game, they all agree that whatever the DM and the dice agree on, that's what happens. So make sure you allow the players, and that you also, sometimes against what you want to happen, you roll the dice and just see, well, you know what? We'll see if they notice you. And you roll the dice. Wow, looks like they don't, right? Everyone will have a more fun and better game by doing that. All right, everybody. That's it for today.